I can be ready.
We and I could continue our comedy routine until you're ready.
I stopped writing. I can talk.
Okay.
All
Cool.
right, well, let's go ahead and kick it off. It is 2 p.m. Eastern. So welcome to the very first installment of the monthly guide call for all IMLS grant recipients for Code Club and small and rural libraries. We're glad that you are joining us here today. We've got a really good crowd. This is awesome. This is always really fun. You guys have been very participatory the entire time we've been working with you. For some of you, it's been a year or more, and others of you, it's been like 6 months. There will probably be a fresh crop coming in soon too, which is exciting. But the point of these monthly calls is let's just get together once a month as a community of learners and let's tackle a problem together. Let's bring in guests and experts who are a little bit further along in this journey with computational thinking and computer science and libraries and ask them to share out of their wealth of expertise and experience. And let's keep it conversational. Let's keep it light. We want to have lots of participation in these calls even though we may rely more heavily on one or two different people. There's always room for discussion, questions, and comments. We'll follow the trail of thought wherever it leads us. A couple points of protocol to get started. This is a Zoom call, and many of you have microphone capabilities. Many of you have video capabilities. You're all welcome to turn on your videos. You don't have to keep them off. I know Linda has a strip over her so that nobody spies on her, but don't worry, we're not spying. There she goes. She disappeared. We're not going to spy on you. If we can see you, it actually helps us feel a little more connected, but not required, just recommended. And then audio. I'd say a good protocol for audio is keep yourself muted unless you're talking. That way there's not all this ambient noise in the background. So just keep yourself muted, and when you have something to say, click the unmute button, wait for a chance to get it in there and get it in there. You're also welcome to use the chat feature. We'll be keeping our eye on that. And so if you don't have audio, or if you're one of those people who just don't like to verbalize very much, you're always welcome to jot thoughts and comments and notes in the chat. We accept all forms of communication here, non-discriminatory based on your communication preferences. All right, with that said, I think I'm going to hand it over to Linda, who actually knows our guest, and let her introduce the guest.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have Brianna Bleeker here from the Waseca Library in Minnesota. I always feel like I should say Minnesota, which I don't have a really good Minnesota accent because Brianna's looking like, what is she doing?
Minnesota.
Minnesota. I don't know why. It's like when I talk about Maine, I start getting a Maine accent for no reason.
Linda, embarrassing our guest already.
I know. Brianna was a part of, I met Brianna through the library's Ready to Code project, which is like 2 years ago now or something. And she was brand new to the work she was doing with coding, and it was fascinating because Brianna developed curriculum. She worked with all different age groups and really developed a really interesting and exciting coding program for her library, for youth, families in the community. So when Luke and I were talking about these sessions, I thought, oh, Brianna would be a perfect guest. So Brianna is going to talk about what she's been doing with coding, and like Luke said, pretty informal, can have questions. But Brianna, you can get us started by talking about what you've been doing, or did, either way.
All right. Well, like you said, I was part of Ready to Code. That was kind of my kickoff point. But I don't know if you knew this. I got hired literally a month before we knew that we were going to be doing this thing. So I came home from a big vacation that I had previously scheduled before I got my job. And they're like, hey, guess what? New project for the next year. And I was like, okay. So a lot of the credit for what we ended up doing goes to my director and the previous head librarian. They did a lot of the planning work. I just kind of followed along in their footsteps. Let's see. So we had 3 different things we did with coding. We have our Level Up is our STEM or our STEAM series, and that's been going since before I was here. and we just kind of incorporated coding into that. For our 7 to 12-year-olds, our teen librarian ran Creator Studio, which was for 10 to 15-year-olds. And those two programs used a lot of the same stuff, just scaled up or scaled down difficulties of the activities. And then probably the thing that I'm most proud of is I created a preschool coding series. Actually, it's 2 5-week series. Um, and you mentioned bringing in experts. I still don't really feel like I'm an expert at all. I'm still learning and everything. But kind of what got me started is, so, I came back and we're like, guess what? We're doing coding stuff. And I'm like, I went to a code.org conference that kind of taught you how to use that. And they talked about why it was important and all that, and what the different computational thinking things are that are taught through there. I learned a lot of stuff through our cohort, the Ready to Code cohort. And I think I attended a webinar or two. There was conferences, and I was basically always on the lookout or listen for the word code or computational thinking or anything that would even slightly maybe be related, and then be like, oh, that's a thing I need to listen to, and just kind of start piecing together all the pieces. And weirdly enough, because part of what Ready to Code was is we were looking for supplies, and I call them toys. They're supposed to be tools, but they're toys. Coding toys for kids. We were looking for a bunch of those. And weirdly enough, quite a few of them have some very informational background stuff. So like Kibo is one yep, thanks. Kibo is one that we did. And they have like a whole 24-page booklet on why they created Kibo and why coding is important. Cubeto is very similar, that kind of thing. So I just kind of listened for anything that might be kind of important. Pinterest activities are great. Some of them explain why they are important, and some of them are just like, hey, this is a thing you can do with your kids. So yeah, that's kind of where I learned all this stuff, and I'm still learning. I don't think I'm anywhere near to being an expert. With I'm going to talk about Little Coders because I'm most proud about that one. I did a lot of the work on that one. With Little Coders, I modeled it after story time. So when you're doing a story time with 4 to 6-year-olds, you want to switch things often. You don't want super, super, super long books because they won't sit still. You got to get them up and moving around, and then sit down into something else, and then get them up and moving around. But this is going to be an hour-long version of that. Using coding stuff. And we used, like I mentioned, Cubeto. It's this little friendly robot that's about this big. And you code him with a little game board. You put little, like a green arrow means go forward, a yellow arrow means go left, a red arrow means go right. And you put those in the order you want, and then you try and make Cubeto go somewhere on this really big, cool map that he has. We also found like Robot Turtles is a board game. Very similar. You just use cards to instruct your turtle where to go, and then a parent is what's called the robot master, who's the only one who's supposed to touch the robot. So these were like the two big things that I wanted to incorporate. So what I ended up doing is finding and modifying activities from Pinterest and from the conference and stuff, and modifying them down so that they worked for preschoolers, and then smashing it all together in a blender, and then being like, all right, I need an hour here. So we did a dancing thing at the beginning of everyone to get their circles out, and then we did the Cubetos, and then we did another game, stand up and move game. So we just kind of have about 4 or 5 things in each hour, and have the majority of the chunk of time dedicated towards the game, the big game that takes the most time. But we switch things up pretty often. I did, try and pull the parents in and teach the parents this is this is how you can take computational stuff home with you and do it with your kids. We have little handouts that go in the.
Hey, Brianna, hold on a sec. Your audio keeps going in and out, so I'm wondering if you just talk really loudly, because I think like if your voice gets lower, it's hard to hear.
Okay.
Is that right?
Or I can slow down. I'm kind of rambling.
It's kind of like the audio like stops picking you up for a little bit. I don't know if it's the source or.
No.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sorry. Did you guys miss anything that I need to repeat?
Yeah, like even now, it's probably 80% quieter than what it should be. And it's not, you're talking just fine. Like Sometimes it comes in
Yeah.
full volume, and sometimes it just stops coming in full volume. I don't know. Is there like a built-in microphone on the computer?
There should be one on my webcam. Just one sec.
All right.
Luke, was Cubetos what everybody got? Which did everybody get? I don't remember.
We got Ozobots and Spheros.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Is that better?
That's 100% better. You're good.
All right. That's odd. Okay. Okie dokie. Was there anything that you guys need me to go back and repeat?
Think a few. I mean, might be too much. Can you go back just to where you started saying story time? You have lots of different things, and then go forward from there. That would be great.
So the Little Coders series of events is modeled after how I was taught to do story time. You know, you got to have a lot of different activities because kids' attention spans are not great, and you got to make sure you get them up and moving, and then sit back down, and then up and moving, and then sit back down to pay attention again. So we incorporated at the beginning of every session, I have a dance game, or a dance game I do. And as the 5-week session progresses, it gets more and more difficult. So at the beginning, and I actually stole this from, like I said, I adapted and modified. This was originally a dance coding lesson for older kids where you used, 1 means you wave your hand in the air and 2 means you spin around in a circle. Preschoolers don't necessarily know their numbers, but they know colors. So I have a red circle, and that means wave your hands in the air. And I have a green circle, and that means shake your head. And I've got a blue circle, and that means spin around in a circle. And an orange circle means clap your hands. And so we put these up on a whiteboard, and I go through the dance with the kids. This means this, this means this, this means this. Now we do it in all a row, and then I put some music to it, and we jam out. And then I let the kids pick the music. And from there, we can kind of build to, how if we have 3 orange circles in a row, we're going to clap, clap, clap. How can we do that shorter? So as the weeks progress, we start putting dots on our circles and making our code. So we show how to repeat repeat specific actions and repeat sets of actions. So that's always at the beginning because we want to get our wiggles out. And then I've got a variety of different activities and materials that get kind of mixed up. Many of them get repeated, specifically the robot turtles and the Cubetos, because you learn a little bit and then you leave and then you come back and learn a little bit more, and it's a little bit more complicated. And so by the end of the 5-week series, you're doing pretty complicated stuff, actually. A lot of it is directional based with preschoolers, but that's perfectly fine. And one thing that, I tell the parents is these coding skills, they're actually pre-coding skills, and they're skills that apply across the board. They're problem-solving skills. They're knowing directions, which you just need to know in life. There's all kinds of stuff that are just useful all across the board. It's not just for sitting in front of a computer. We started with 10 weeks of testing because my original instructions were have 10 weeks worth of preschool coding activities. So I started with, I was going to do a 10-week series, and we started with 10 weeks of testing. And as I went through that testing, I was like, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. There's too much I want to do in an hour. There's not enough to make 10 weeks. So we ended up splitting it up into the 2 5-week series. And I call them the Techless and the Techie because one of them has robots and Cubeto and one of them has the board game. So it just kind of depends on what kind of materials I want to pull out for a certain series. I really like that one. Do you guys have any questions about that?
I just want to comment real fast. Brianna, I love your attitude of you're a lifelong learner. You have the attitude for like making this stuff succeed, which is, I'm just going to learn and tinker. I'm not going to give up, and I'm going to, I'm not an expert, but I love learning. And I mean, if there's one thing I could take away from the first 10 minutes that you've been sharing, it's like, man, I need more of that. Whatever you got there, I need more of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of, let's try this. Oh, that didn't work. Let's do it again. Let's try this. Oh, that was awesome. We need to do that one again and again and again. Yeah. We have The other thing the other thing I do is our Level Up series is our STEM series, which is geared towards 7 to 12-year-olds, and it was pre-existing before I showed up. We just kind of, added coding ones. These are all one-off events. So one day, one event is engineering extravaganza. You build things with random materials, and one series was I'm trying to think of the ones that were there before I was there. Inventors Lab. There was a whole kit of stuff that you could use to invent a variety of things. So we just used the money we were given with the grant to buy the materials to make new kits, and we actually have quite a few new kits. The best ones, so here's some knowledge from someone who has some experience. The best ones for more one-off events that are easily scalable to, I have 2 kids, I have 10 kids, I have 20 kids. Spheros, there are so many things you can do with Spheros, but they usually, like the actual, I'm going to do this, fits into about an hour. So with that one, we've got, you can do mazes with Spheros. You can throw our Spheros in water. I have discovered that once the kids find the sound buttons, this is a drag and drop coding language where they drag in they drag in the button, and the button says, say this and continue on the rest of the coding. And they absolutely adore making the robot lady say all kinds of weird things, all kinds of things. So I caught that and I designed an entire event around that. The point of the event is make the robot lady say a thing, and then your Sphero acts it out. So it's intended to be for stories. Little Red Riding Hood walked through the forest, so your Sphero is colored red and she wanders through a forest, kind of deal. It's usually just really random stories, but hey, whatever, the kids are having fun and they're practicing their coding. The other one that is I think it's really successful, we have Osmo. So we had iPads before, again, this was something we had beforehand. Osmo Coding Jam is a music-based one. Same thing, you use actual physical tiles, drag them together, and they click in with magnets, and then your camera on the iPad registers what they've put down and turns it into music. Each tile means a certain sound, and then you can change your instruments as you get more experience. You get more and more instruments. And it's, playosmo.com. We also got their Genius Kit, which has numbers and words and drawing and physics, and that's less quote-unquote coding, but it's still STEM stuff that the kids absolutely adore. And I'm hoping to do an Osmo event in the spring that's just everybody in your family show up, and we're going to have all the things all at once, 3 hours, come and go as you want, play with your family, play with friends, whatever. Just kind of let people experience Osmo instead of picking one thing to focus on, which is what we've done so far. So that one's been really good. You may or may not have heard of Bloxels. That was another one we did. Kids absolutely love it. It's design your own 8-bit video game. Adore it. But with our usual one-off sort of style of doing events, they don't usually get to end up with a real finished product. So I'm still working on trying to figure out how to get we have a lot of I don't want to say problems, but getting kids to show up again and again and again and again is a little tricky sometimes. I see them a lot, but not always for a series. We're going to do this every week. They're like, I can't do that. So we're still working on that bit, but everybody who's ever put their hands on the Bloxels are like, I love this. This is so fun. They get to play other people's games. So you get to design a character, design a board game, decorate your board game, not your board game, your game levels. It's a lot of fun. The kids really like that. We actually had Ozobots before I showed up, and that's been another really good one-off one. And then we have Kano. Kano Pixels and Kano Motion Sensor are the 2 that we have. We're looking into getting Kano Harry Potter wands. I'm really excited about that. And this one has been our toughest one. It's still drag and drop coding for the kids, but it requires a little bit more reading. So the kids who are 7 years old and just kind of learning, they really struggle with that. And in terms of the actual materials itself, there's a lot of staff setup and high staff knowledge has to go into this one. So our system is set up in such a way that we have one main branch, 2 main branches, and then about 7 other smaller branches that we send events out to. Basically, there's these kits with kind of event in a box, and the Kano never really goes out because everyone is too scared to touch it. I don't know how to set it up. I don't know what I'm doing. So I frequently go out to the branches and do it myself there. But like I said, this one definitely requires a series. This is how you do the beginning stuff, and then you build on it and build on it. And we have a little bit of problems with getting kids to come back. So we're still working on fine tuning that one. That's why we think the Harry Potter ones, the word Harry Potter will get kids to come in. And then from there we can be like, haha, we're slipping teaching in when you're having fun. You don't know it, but you are. So that's a future plan. Any questions on that?
I've got a quick question, and if others have questions after this, please speak up or type it into the chat. When you use those hardware devices, number one, it sounds like the first chunk of stuff you were talking about was mostly preschool aged, at least pre-reader aged. These hardware devices sound like the next age range up. Is that right? Okay.
Yep. This is our level up series, which is for 7 to 12. The little coders was for 4 to 6.
All right. Thank you.
So, yep. The first one was preschoolers and all pre-reader skills. And honestly, we call it coding, but it's pre-coding skills. It's learning how to code and decode symbols, which is what reading is, period. So Scratch Junior, we do that in our one. That's a great one. We've messed around with Scratch a little bit with our older kids, but yeah, most of this is you have to be able to read to be able to do it.
Okay. The question about the robots and hardware devices is what's your ratio of number of devices to kids?
It varies a little bit. And I'm going to kind of touch on that in a minute. Usually we're able to get away with 1-to-1. We have one iPad for every kid who's in there most times. If you do not, and that has happened, we do, I don't know if it's called paired programming. This is something that other people have come up with. It wasn't us. You have a driver and a navigator kind of thing. There's one person who's in charge of actually touching the keyboard, touching the mouse, touching whatever touching the iPad. And the person who's the navigator is double checking their work to make sure there's no mistakes, helping them figure out the problem, and you make sure that they get to switch about every 5 minutes. Or
those of you that have seen our Prenda resource, we call it the pilot and the co-pilot, that exact same idea.
Yep. So we usually go 2-to-1. With Bloxels in specific, we happen to have about twice as many Bloxel boards, the physical component, as we do iPads. So one person can be working on the level, one person can be working on a character, and then a third person can be using the iPad to take pictures or solving a particular problem or playing other people's. So we can kind of group them together in 3 that way. Yep, Scratch Junior is in any tablet device, anything you Scratch, any computer. So if you have a computer lab of any any size, you can get your kids paired up on that one. So we usually are able to get away with 1-to-1. Bloxels is you can use it with just an iPad. I believe it is just an Apple. I don't know if it has Android. We have iPads, not tablets. So I don't always know what the Android stuff is. There's a physical board with these little tiny plastic cubes that you use to fill it in and create an 8-bit character or your 8-bit video game level or whatever. And then you take a picture of it with your iPad, and from there can edit the decoration, can edit, you can be like, oh, I made a mistake here. I'm going to change this and move it over here. The different colors, there's 8 different colors, and each different color means something. So green is ground you can stand on, blue is water, purple is enemies, yellow is coins you pick up, yada, yada, yada. But you can decorate it however you want. So the yellow quote unquote coins can be turned into gems, or they can be turned into Pokeballs, or whatever you want to decorate it as. So, oh good, they're on Android and Kindle as well. So you don't have to have an iPad to do Bloxels. In my experience with the Bloxels in specific, I have discovered you can do it just with your finger. You can just kind of paint with your finger. And a lot of kids, when they realize, oh, I don't have to take a picture, I can just make it here, they go straight to that. They skip the board. I try and encourage them to use the board, both so that we can do the paired programming stuff, and also because we want them to realize what you do in the physical realm can influence the digital realm. So I try and encourage them to use the board. Doesn't always work. Chromebooks. I believe, unfortunately, it does not work on Chromebooks. We have done, so one thing I did want to touch on, with we have so much, because of the grant, which was amazing, we got a lot of tech toys. And we have our intermediate school, our middle school, does a coding unit, but they don't necessarily have as much stuff. So last year in December and in May, we did a coding day where I brought 6 different toys, and the kids were given an hour to play with one of them, and we got all 450 kids through in one day. So it was a little crazy. I'm hoping to do it again this year, but we tried the Chromebooks for both Sphero and Bloxels, and due to needing Bluetooth and due to needing cameras in a specific position and yada yada, it didn't actually work out. Because with the Chromebooks, their camera was right here and their screen was right here, but to take a picture, you need to see the screen with the camera on the other side. So for us, it didn't work. Maybe they do work. For other people who can get the cameras to work, we just couldn't get them to work. We tried a bunch.
I actually think, Brianna, that the camera, and it might be different in different Chromebooks, that the camera has to be in a specific place. I mean, it's a rear facing camera, I think is what it says.
So with the tablets, or with our iPads, this is the camera, and we can hold it above above the Bloxels and see what the camera is seeing before we take the picture. With the Chromebooks, it's harder to like this, and their camera was only right here, so you couldn't like take the picture and see what you were doing at the same time. I did try putting a web camera on there to give it a rear facing camera, and when I was in Bloxels, it did not recognize that there was another camera. So it's like, it just kind of depends on what kind of Chromebook you have.
However, I'm going to say one thing. Doing that with youth could be really interesting to have them figure out, like, what an interesting spatial kind of thing to figure out, like, can I take this picture? How would I have to hold this to take this picture? At least from my mind.
Using a desktop for which program specifically?
Yeah, it's a hard question, Jason, because we've talked about a lot. All these programs are different.
Everything is different. You need to test it and try it. I can tell you with desktops, Scratch is an online program and it works. Kano has a website. I personally find it fairly limiting, but it can give you a good hour to an hour and a half to more, depending on how fast your kids read. Bloxels has recently moved from the app system that I have to something a little bit different. I am not entirely sure what it is. I do know that they have a website, but I believe their website is a paid-based thing. We haven't touched it too much because we have something that works. Sphero, unfortunately, it's a Bluetooth receptive robot. That's how you control it. So, and I believe the app is, there is a Sphero website, but there's not a Sphero programming site.
There is a Sphero desktop app for PC, for Mac, and for Chromebook.
There is.
That works. Yeah. So, Jason, for you and for everybody else that's on here, you all have been given Ozobots and Spheros, and the curriculum that Prenda is launching into our system this season will be compatible on any device. So,
awesome.
Chromebook.
That's really cool to hear.
Mac. And we're not writing any curriculum that requires a tablet or a touchscreen phone. It's all going to work on Chrome.
That was just something we happened to have before. We have iPads for a variety of things. And so it's worked out for us really well. Comments on Ozoblockly or Lego Mindstorms. Lego Mindstorms was in our creator studio, so that was the 10 and 15, and I did not have much to do with it. I do know, however, that the gentleman who was running it found it very complicated, and you needed to have kids who were willing to come back to learn it. The older group usually did a 2-hour session, and once a month instead of a 1-hour section every other week or so that I sometimes manage to do. So I don't have a whole lot of personal experience with it. I have used it a little bit, and I personally find it very fascinating, but I haven't used it for like a year or more. So I don't have much experience with that. Azo Blackly, I have used Azobots with the markers on paper, and I find that to be very finicky. A lot of the younger kids struggle with getting their line widths correct. Azo Blackly is very interesting. I have not played with it too much because we usually try and start with these are the colors and then move into this is how you can do it online so they see both ways. And it's hard to squish that into an hour. Azobots are
Brianna, oh wait, you still have one other. Do you want more questions already there?
No, I'm just checking the chat over here.
Okay. I had one other question. Like, so how do you decide, or like, do you have a framework for, oh, we're going to work on these today, or is there a decision-making tree of some sort?
A little bit. So we plan our, so all of the stuff that I've mentioned are in what we call kits. There are kit in a box. And so I'm sharing it with all 9 libraries. So we have a system where we basically request, I want this, this, and this kit. And then we're assigned a week where we will have that kit available, and we pick within that week what our date is. So I have to make sure I have to balance with everyone else. And then in that as well, I also try and make sure I don't do the same thing. So like this fall, I'm doing Spheros and Bloxels and I want to say Kanos later in December, because last spring I did Azobots and Bloxels and something else. So like I try and spread it out a little bit, and during the summer I did Coding Jam. So we're not doing Coding Jam during the fall. I really try and spread it out so that the kids don't get, oh, we're doing those again. That's mostly where mine comes in. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Ooh, that is a really good idea. Graph paper with the Oz. I'm writing that down.
We can send you the transcript. That's awesome. Are there other questions from people or comments or thoughts? I think Luke and I can always ask a million questions because I have more, but.
I think, so Brianna, just for some context, you may already know this, but we've got 50 libraries around the country, small and rural libraries that received this grant through IMLS for coding in small and rural libraries. And they're using, they have up until this point, well, over the summer, I guess they all received Azobots and Spheros. But before that, they were using just online tutorials for all kinds of coding. They were using Scratch, they were learning HTML and CSS, Python, JavaScript, through all of the App Lab, like apps and app development and stuff like that. So their kids had access to all, but it was all screen-based, all like, learning how to code, learning the basics of coding, learning advanced concepts in coding, learning how to build websites, learning how to do video games, but all like screen-based. And so I think an important thing to take away, and maybe you can speak to this even more, is to engage kids, it's good to have variety.
Yes. I personally really like having a lot of variety because it lets me kind of expand my horizons. We actually don't do a whole lot of screen-based stuff because we don't have computers available, like desktop screen computers. And I personally have been like, I want to learn Python, and I haven't managed to do that yet. But yeah, we have a lot of tools and toys that don't deal with, just a static screen. We want them up and moving around if possible. Part of that is because we want them to realize that what happens in the screen can affect the real world. One project from Ready to Code that me and my director are both like, oh, that's so cool, I wish we could do that, is the kids got together to create an app that tracked their local train in their city. And the kids got together, and I think it was either the same city or another city, but it was another bigger city that they helped the city create an alarm system for if a specific janitorial closet was open. And like, that was like an actual project that had an actual goal that people would then continue to use. And that isn't something that we have managed to do yet. And I'm like so jealous, and I want to figure it out. So Spheros are a lot of fun. Ozobots are a lot of fun. But some of those screen-based stuff, I'm like, I wish we could do that, because it creates something that they will be able to use at home, or they'll be able to keep using elsewhere.
Yeah, and really to use some of the advanced functions of the robots, you have to know how to code. You have to understand if and then statements and loops.
Yes. We have, like I said, we have a lot of one-off events. So I struggle with teaching 7 to 12-year-olds the idea of variables. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult, and a lot of the more advanced stuff requires variables. If this, then that, or if X equals, if this thing happens, then I need to save that number and remember it for when I need to put it out or whatever. So some of that it's a little bit, more like the creator studio stuff, the 10 to 15-year-old stuff. They get it pretty well.
Yeah.
But,
so that's something that we can use as a working hypothesis as our community of learning is, having a hybrid of options, not just screen stuff, but also having these robotics and having curriculum, and maybe just having it. What are your thoughts on this, Brianna? Maybe just having it all available, like in a given session. All of the people on this call, all the people that are receiving the grants are running regular code clubs. So once a week, kids will show up for
awesome.
And they'll do it either ongoing or for their entire fall season, entire spring season.
That's
so
amazing.
That's the format that's being used primarily.
That's really amazing, actually. Getting kids back again and again to be able to teach them some of the higher level stuff. We have done.
That is a weak spot.
We have done. It kind of fell off a little bit. We call them. What did we call them? Coding Clubhouse. They were our open labs or open studios where I would literally take out every coding-based toy that I could find in the library and stick them into our meeting room. And then I would just be there for 2-3 hours for kids to wander in, play with what they wanted. They could ask me any questions. They could do their own projects. It was the people who showed up found it very helpful. They were entertained the entire time we're there. They were creating these cool, awesome projects. But we struggled a little bit with getting people to come in because they weren't really sure what Coding Clubhouse was or what this open studio thing was. So it's very important to have that. So if you introduce Ozobots one week, Spheros the next week, and then have a week where they can just play with whichever interests them, that can also tell you, I had 5 kids over here and 7 kids over here. Maybe we want to do this one more heavily because we have more kids interested in that one. You know what I mean? So that was also something it's a very good idea to have open lab time for the kids, not to follow your instructions, but just to play with whatever they're messing around with so that they can create these interest-driven.
Yeah, and that's how all of these people are structuring is kids
awesome.
Work on whatever they want to. If they want to work on video games, they can. If they want to work on websites, they can. But it'd be cool to just have the robots or the hardware, the physical devices as an option that they could work on every week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have 2 questions. One is, do you ever give them challenges when they are like just playing around with stuff? I know some people in Code Club do that, so I'm just curious if you found any successful challenges when you put out the Spheros or the Ozobots or anything like that.
I mean, with the Spheros, I usually show them, so the Sphero app has this, there's I don't remember what it's called, the activities page, where everybody else in the world who has access to internet and Spheros can put up the projects they've been doing. I encourage my kids, if they couldn't think of anything, to browse through there and just find something they like. I also tend to, if they do a thing, say they get their Sphero to go in a circle and end up exactly where it started. That's pretty cool. Yeah. But now I'm like, all right, do one big circle that ends in a spiral right here. Or, I take what they did and be like, all right, let's bend it a little bit and twist it and try something new. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't.
So that leads to my second question, because you said about the Kano kits and how other staff, when you send them out to branches, they're a little bit complicated. So what are your tips for people for because I know you came in, you're like, I'm going to teach myself this. Luke already said, I'm a learner. I'm just going to figure it out. Do you have tips for helping other people to do that, to just jump in or try stuff out or whatever?
Don't be afraid of pushing buttons. That's actually a piece of advice that I give to a lot of different people, because I'm going to end up on a soapbox here. A lot of people are like, oh, kids are just naturals at this tech thing. Kids know how to do it kind of instinctively. They don't come out of the womb knowing how to do the thing. What kids do is they're learning about the world, so they test something. They say, what does this do? Oh, what does this do? What does this do? I don't know. What does this do? I made a mistake. I got to back up. How do I back up? This? Nope, that didn't do it. So kids will push buttons. They just push random buttons and then they break your machine and you're like, oh my gosh. But that's how they learn. And so when you get, sorry, this is going to be a total soapbox. When you get older people in the library who are like, I don't know how to use a computer. You're like, yes, but you can learn. Sit down, poke a button. Okay, that didn't do what you wanted. Now poke a different button. Okay, that didn't do what you wanted either. Now poke it. Look, you found the button. That's the button you need. Now in this button, find some more buttons. So don't be afraid to poke buttons. When you're given the Ozobots, you're given the Spheros, you also need to take some time to just play for yourself. You can't teach the kids how to use the Sphero unless you sat down and said, what does this block do? What is the sound thing? What is this play random sound? I don't want a random sound. I want a dolphin sound. What is this gyroscope thing? So you got to take some time for yourself to just play and have fun. Scroll through, do what I said, scroll through the activities and be like, oh, this person used theirs in a chariot race. How do I do a chariot race? Oh, this person turned 9 spheres into the solar system. What does that mean? So take some time to play for yourself. Don't be afraid to push buttons. And if you break it, you break it. There's always a hard reset. Like you're not going to really irrevocably break your machinery unless you actually dropped the Sphero, and you're not going to do that because you're an adult. You only have to worry about that with your 4-year-olds. So don't be afraid. Yeah, just don't be afraid to poke buttons. That's probably the biggest tip I can give you. Is
I'm getting you a t-shirt that says that. Don't be afraid to poke buttons. Or maybe every library staff member across the world should have that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Other questions? Or Brianna, other things you've worked on or advice you have for people? Things you are most excited about?
Oh, well, I kind of touched on this a little bit with our coding days. So I got in touch with the middle school in town and was like, hey, we have all these really cool things and I would like to bring them into the school because honestly, we weren't getting as many kids as I would have liked into the library. And that librarian jumped on it and ran with it. And so now we've done it twice now. They're all day events, one day. It's required the librarian to be participating. I was participating. The administrative staff had to help out because they created an entire schedule for all of the kids to be in the media center 3 classes at a time, 1 hour. So I had 3 4th grade classes, 3 5th grade classes, 3 6th grade classes. And, we had the whole day. And they are split into groups to try out one of 6 or 7 different tech toys. And then they're encouraged, we're like, all right, go tell your friends about what you learned because we're going to do different groups next time. In May they all did something different. And I'm hoping to do another one this December. We do them during December and May because those are our kind of down months when the kits pretty much are here. And so I don't have to fight with anybody else for the kits. But we have those open days. So I also would really suggest, if at all possible, to get involved with, connect to the school libraries or to other people in town and try and work with them. That's been really cool, actually. Anything else? I don't know.
Anybody else have questions?
Or something you want to tell me about one of those desktop ones that I don't know how to use yet?
And actually, Brianna, as they're doing that, typing or about to ask, can you just talk a little bit about Waseca? I realized we should have asked you that to start.
Oh,
What's that community like?
yeah. Waseca is, I think we have about 10,000 people. We're a smaller town in between. We're in South Minnesota. Like, I could tell you those in between cities, but you guys probably don't actually know where. I'm in between. So in Minnesota, there's Rochester is one big city over here on the south, and Mankato is over here on the south. And I'm pretty much smack in the middle. So really in between that line. We have about 1,500 kids that we send flyers to in the school for all our events. And 10,000 people in the town. And kind of the biggest things in town is we have a Bird's Eye is a food, like corn canning kind of thing. That's probably one of the bigger ones. A lot of farming around. Yeah, small town, or at least smaller than I'm used to. I'm used to Rochester. That's really good. Anything else?
Anybody else? So one thing I wish Zoom did was like tell you when someone was typing.
Mm-hmm.
We'll give it another second.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brianna, there's just some gold in what you've shared today. I'm really grateful for you taking the time to hang out with us and hang out with our community of learners. We have so much to learn together, and I go back to kind of that realization I had at the beginning that you just epitomize the need for librarians to have an attitude of being a lifelong learner. You know, I'm going to learn. It's really that growth mindset thing. This is hard. This is uncomfortable, but I'm going to stick with it and figure it out. I'm going to push buttons and break stuff and tinker with it. And I'm going to keep an attitude that, like, if it's hard with the kids and if there's friction trying to facilitate these things, I'm just going to stick with it and learn and try to get better. And I love that. I think that's so valuable. You know, I joke with my math professor friend at local community college. Growth mindset is this huge buzzword right now and has been for several years. Thank you, Carol Dweck, and Sal Khan and the rest. It's a great term, great idea. The problem is you can't just like, Linda, go have a growth mindset. There, I did it. Yeah. Right. It's like, how do you actually transfer that idea to somebody else? And, you know, I think there's an intro to one of my favorite books, and he's telling this story, and he says, you know, I didn't used to like jazz. I really thought jazz was a funny genre, and I just wasn't into it. And then one day I was walking through the park in Portland, and I saw this guy playing the saxophone in a tunnel. And I stood there and I watched him play his saxophone for 5 minutes, and he didn't open his eyes once. The entire time he was playing the saxophone, this like jazz music in the park, because he loved it and he was like into it and he was enjoying it. After that, I liked jazz. After that, I understood it. Sometimes you have to see somebody love something before you love it yourself. And I think that's what you're doing for us right now, Brianna, is you're modeling what it is to be a lifelong learner. And that's just awesome. I like I said earlier, I need more of that in my own life, and it's helpful to see that from you. So thank you.
Someone did actually ask a question.
Yeah.
We are large enough to support paid employees. What we have is our branches have 20 hours a week on desk and 2 hours a week off desk for running. That's the 20-hour a week libraries. But once a month we get together for staff training, a large staff meeting, so everyone can kind of talk about how their libraries are going. And in those staff meetings, we have done training. So that's where they're learning how to use these materials that I'm sending out in kits. They also generally have access to a sub who can hold the desk down for an hour while the librarian themselves runs a program. So I do know that some libraries have volunteers at their programs, particularly if the ratio of kids to adults gets a little overwhelming, depending on whatever the event is. But most of these coding ones, I believe there's a sub holding down the desk for an hour or two while the librarian themselves does the program, and they are paid. So that's just how we happen to work.
there are a lot of libraries that are using only volunteers
Mhm.
for this because that's who's available and has
Right.
skills and interests. But yeah, it's a big mix how that all works. Which Brianna, I was thinking about this earlier. So because you're doing so many different ages, right? You're doing the preschool, you're doing the elementary, you're doing older kids, middle school. Do you sometimes have, and I can't remember if you do you sometimes have older kids working with younger kids as a way to help support the programs?
We have not as of yet. Um, Part of it is due to let me rephrase that. Our coding stuff we have not as yet. We do
Mhm.
have another monthly event where we have teenagers come in as volunteers to help manage things during an after school program. But for coding, we don't as of yet have like a teenager set that is interested enough to come in and teach or come in and learn and then teach. Most of the kids who are interested in coding at that age are doing code club at their school. So we do a lot of the introductory stuff, and then once they know what they're doing, they move into the school, and we don't have access to them anymore because they're teenagers who have jobs and clubs and really busy lives, to be honest. So we haven't. I have seen it happen a little bit more organically, where in our group of 7 to 12-year-olds, the 12-year-olds got it in 5 minutes, and then they turn around and are like, "Let me show you how to do this" to the 8-year-olds. That's really been helpful. So it can happen organically, but we have not done it on purpose. I want to. Seems really helpful. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and bookmark this conversation for now. This is, like I said at the beginning, the first of a regular installment of video calls. What I did from an administrative standpoint is I created a Google event in my calendar, and then I just invited people who filled out that form to it. I don't know if that's the best way to organize these, but it was, at the time I was thinking about it, the best solution I could think of. So you've all been invited to a recurring monthly event. If you can't make one of them, I don't know if you decline the event, if it will cancel all of your future events. I don't know how any of that works, but we'll just keep trying to stay ahead on the communication and
Poke button, see if it works.
Yeah. We'll learn from it as best as we can. But yeah, we've got a list of topics for future conversations. Today's was about a variety of ages and how you engage them and things like that. So we've got a list that is started that's generated from you guys. If you have ideas for future conversations that you think we should have during these times, feel free to jot those into the chat right now. I'll add them to our running list, or feel free to email me, luke@prenda.co, and I'll add them to our list that way. But those topics are all generated by you. Yeah, so thanks for taking an hour of your day on the third Wednesday of this month. Linda, any closing thoughts from you?
No, Brianna, your energy is amazing. I knew that already. And one of the things I've always loved about you, what Luke said, but also like you jumped in. I remember when we started Ready to Code, it was like, oh, I'm doing this. I'm going to learn how to do it. And it was awesome. So that mindset is fantastic. So thank you so much for launching our monthly Code Club sessions. I really appreciate it. I was also going to say, so early on when Brianna started talking, I put in a couple of links from the library's Ready to Code website of her lesson plans for preschoolers, plugged and unplugged. But if you go there, you'll find a bunch of other stuff, both the Keno kits and the lots of stuff she's talked about. You can just search block schools or whatever, and you'll find lots of different things. So that could be pretty useful too. And thank you for your email, Brianna.
Yep, I just put my email in. If you look at any of those plans or like, I don't understand this thing, just shoot me an email. I will totally explain what I was thinking. Theoretically, they should be clear because other people in my system have to read them and they have read them, but you never know. So there's my email if you have any questions for me. Just let me know where I'm supposed to know you from.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great day, guys.
Bye, everybody.
And, all right, we'll talk to you all later. Cue closing music.
Hum.
Um,